Morning to
And
you.
yeah, and I'm wondering where your head is this day.
In the span of 48 hours or so, I have begun to worry about the issue of anti Semitism as an intentional act of additional division in American politics.
Mm,
So there is anti Semitism. We spent considerable time in the spring and early summer this past week. The president of Columbia resigned, the
hmm
third university president. There had been three deans who resigned rather than be fired from Columbia. Universities are getting ready to assemble again. There is no ceasefire. There is still a horrific war and hostages. And we are 90 days, less than 90 days away from a presidential election. And now anti Semitism is being used as an intentional leverage of more division.
Give us an example.
Uh, so a week ago, I sent you a piece called Jews Are Tired of Being Used as a Political Football.
Hmm
Um, Jews don't want someone like Elise Stefanik to be seen because of her role in congressional hearings as a protector of Jews. Do Jews need a Republican aggressive mechanism? Now, Wednesday night, I sat down simply at a friend's party, and a friend I've known since I moved to Brazil said Kamala Harris is an anti Semite and her husband is not a good Jew. You don't vote in the US elections, but I can tell you that is a Republican misstatement. I don't like Trump either. I spent almost 45 minutes trying to help these Jews understand and now there are articles I keep sending you about Trump using anti Semitism. Yesterday in New Jersey, Marian Edelson, who's one of the wealthiest women in the world, the
hmm
wealthiest woman in Israel, embracing Trump, saying, if you love Israel, if you are a good Jew, you will put Trump back in the White House. Look, uh, when Colombia's president resigned, already there were people saying, right and left, look how powerful Jews are.
Is maybe this is a digression, but it it occurs to me that I haven't asked you, and I don't know. Uh, I do know that um, so, so it's roughly 50% of white Roman Catholics, 50% of white mainline Protestants um, are attracted to the MAGA movement. And I know that even extends to like Amish and Mennonite communities. Is is there a sliver or swath of the Jewish community that is does not see Trump in transactional terms, but is attracted uh, to the
The,
movement and the
the
strong
stats
mandate?
say 30% uh, from previous links, but given the circumstances since October 7th, and given the upsurge in anti Semitism, his exaggerated representation, not only of the horrors coming to America, another 1929, we're on the verge of World War III. Yes, the anti Semitism in America is now like the Holocaust.
Hmm.
So if you intentionally use fear to keep the division, that can't be good for anybody. What I don't want to be defending a political party on the basis of whether or not it is facilitating anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
This is a new dynamic. So he moves an embassy to Jerusalem. He was, as he claims, the architect of the Abraham Accords. If I had been president, there would have been no Gaza. I don't begin to understand this. Is there a current problem of significant anti Semitism in America? There is. I have been asked to teach a 4-week course in a Sao Paulo Jewish Academy, and I wanted to do it on the basis of interfaith dialogue. Involve you.
Mm-hmm.
I said, have every Jew bring a non-Jew. I will bring an American pastor. And the convener of the course said, how well did all your interfaith work do since October 7th?
And you said what?
Yeah, okay. It didn't pay the dividends we had all hoped, but we have to stay in the relationships. The course is now called The Safety and Risk of Being a Jew after October 7th. So, if there's a reality, do you use the vulnerability of that reality and exacerbate it in order to make people's fear a position of poor decision making? You use the word transactional. This is purely transactional. This is creating chaos and disruption because that always benefits him.
Yeah.
So, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid there's a reality that instead of someone calming people down, he will use the reality to continue to engage people's fears. We have had 10 months of sustained conversation and modeling of what it means to find critical space for differences. We do that in order to show one need not disengage to learn.
Mm-hmm.
One need not disengage to feel safe. So we have authoritarian people in positions of power all over the world who want the extremes and the chaos. How will that help our dialogue?
It seems like
How do I explain to Christians that, yes, I am concerned about the hatred of Jews? Do I need to push presidents of universities out in order to accomplish a greater sense of ease? That's not my goal.
Mm-hmm. But the awareness, like where you began, it seems for for dialogue to have any success, there has to be an awareness that anti-Semitism um, isn't just an affliction or a possession. It's a tool that political groups will use for their own ends.
Consistently, historically.
Yeah, that it's to be aware of ways in which we are being manipulated seems to be important too.
To go back even to the earliest forms of scriptural anti Judaism. It's not just binary and a way of intellectually desecrating the complexity of Scripture, but it does not permit people to engage in how much complexity can we endure?
Mm-hmm.
How do we learn to live with less certainty and more risk?
How do you feel? Um, it seems like a eon ago now. How do you think about the vice president's decision not to choose Josh Shapiro as her running mate, which most people anticipated?
Many people did. I had always hoped she would choose Mark Kelly, Senator Mark Kelly. I wanted someone who had a tremendous amount of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Shapiro had been a state attorney general. That's how he knew the vice president, then has been a governor a very short time.
Mm-hmm.
We have had in the choosing of Governor Walz someone who had served Congress several terms and is in his second term as governor. Uh, were there people on the left who were concerned about the quote image of a pro Israel Jew? Sure. Was that going to be a distraction? Okay. So now she made various political calculations, but political calculations in a toss up election do not result in an anti Semitic intention.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Kelly's wife is Jewish.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay. Yeah. Gabby Giffords. And her synagogue has been an instrumental source of her healing after the assassination attempt.
I didn't
So
know that. You guys are everywhere.
we're everywhere.
You're even in Brazil. Like totally surprising.
We're even in Brazil. So what does it mean when Jews are talking about, are we ready to be a vice president? Well, we have the husband of a presidential candidate who's Jewish, who is labeled, Doug Emhoff, as a bad Jew by Trump to the prime minister of the state of Israel. So, do I worry that we're so much a part of the political vocabulary that it now adds to the problem? Yes, I do. Do I think that Governor Shapiro was chosen or not chosen through a filter of anti Semitism? No, I don't. Do I
Okay.
think it had the risk of further exacerbating the divisions? I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. I assume you've
Look,
seen the. I assume you've seen or heard the footage from I think it was a rally in Detroit where the vice president was interrupted with chants of genocide.
And do you want Trump?
Mm-hmm.
It's a reasonable question. Critique was offered. You have to listen to those who are critiquing the position that you've represented. Okay, you want something further to the left, but further to the left, as part of election calculations, is not where the center is. So, how much attention do you give those who are angry on behalf of, and now I would have said, who are you representing? You are referring and using a word. Are you representing the perpetrator of October 7th, or are you representing the innocent people who are also the victims of Hamas?
Mm-hmm.
If we continue to engage in all being caught up in the slogans, in words that we don't and can't critically understand and use with each other. So she can't answer the far left that thinks the US has been arming Israel and its active genocide, and also the Jews who were warned by Adelson and Trump, the far left is going to destroy your stability in America. It's that predicament that agitates me this morning in our conversation.
Yeah.
If I'm going to send my kid back to school, if I were still working at a university, where do I position myself? Do I position myself with an awareness of the intentionality of Project 2025 and Christian nationalism? If I were teaching my intro to Bible class, would I have more aggressive Christians in the class asking why I'm not going to let them have their creationist reading of Genesis? So, the complexity in which we live requires more conscientious effort not to remain on the margins, which are too far apart for a common discourse of exchange. I can't respond to someone whose purpose is to conjure fear when there is a problem about which people are afraid. I can't deny the last 6 months. I can't deny that the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, has just invited me for an information webinar in preparing for university returns. What does it mean for us to be able to know it's safe to be a Jew again on campus? Is that statement in and of itself an exaggeration? Is it irresponsible to tell Jews they have nothing to worry about on any U.S. campus? People ask, Rabbi, you used to teach. Can I send my kids to the U.S. to go to school? So, how many different places should I simultaneously stand in order to represent what the Jewish community is? With those who are angry about genocide in Detroit, with those who want to support what Adelson supports in the settlements on the West Bank, with those who have asked for a ceasefire and the hostages returned. I want to come on a podcast where the mutual goal of conversation and learning takes a higher degree of importance than being stuck. Why would I disrespect a church that is misrepresented in Project 2025?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't I want to come and ask you, how does Christianity understand its relation to democracy? And wouldn't I want to listen?
Yeah, and it's important there's not any one answer to that question.
But this will be less than 90 days, and irrespective of whether he accepts reality or not, if your methodology is constant exaggerated disruption, what is left of the civility when this is over?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it got lost in the news. The U.S. political news. Can you talk a little bit about the new chosen leader of Hamas?
My oh my oh my oh my oh. Hiding somewhere in the tunnels in Gaza, the architect, the previous head of the military wing, Sinwat, previously a prisoner in Israeli prisons, speaks Hebrew, someone who was involved in the assassination of Palestinians who were informers to Israel. That's why he was in prison. A fundamentalist Muslim who understands his role as a Muslim to remove the infidels from that which is religiously theirs. So we're not talking about someone who is a Palestinian, belongs in a place as determined in 1947 to be shared. I can't begin to unravel all the idioms that burden both people. But Sinwat has decided, as now Hamas is the determining factor in its absence at the ceasefire talks. Mm-hmm. Egypt expelled Hamas as being too extreme, as being linked to the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a group that is not a source of resistance. This is a group by its own stated determination on multiple levels, which seeks the elimination of the Jewish state. It has attempted to go back to its 1988 charter and remove the term individual Jews to include only Israel as a nation, thereby attempting not to be responsible for inculcating the fear that Muslims are supposed to go and destroy Jews individually. Look, I don't have an opinion about the assassination in Tehran. I don't know what that calculation meant to Israel. Why now and not another time? I don't understand it. The warring between nations is something that begins in Genesis 14.
Yeah.
We could go in, why does the text include this random, the War of the Kings? Why? Because it wants to make sure we understand this is a part of the default reality of different peoples.
It's funny you say that. So I've been in a sermon series in the Epistle to the Romans, and throughout the letter, but especially Romans 5 through 7 and 8, Paul makes sin and death the subject of verbs. Before the law was, sin entered into the world and reigned like a monarch, is the language Paul uses. And so there's something about the crucifixion that forces Paul the Jew to take an even more grim view of human nature and the way of the world. So it's just been on my mind.
Redemption, the first proof of God as the source of national redemption, is the implementation of the 10th plague, the destruction of the firstborn of Egypt. Do we grapple with the necessity of that threshold of death in order to be the supplicants of God's grace? So I don't know where Hamas ranks in the many different categories of nations, of communities, of resistance, but we remain at a plateau of horror. More than 10 months. Some people have buried, others not buried the remains of those they loved. And when I focus on the fact that Hamas took corpses back to Gaza, which for me is a new definition of an intentional, unthinkable act.
Yeah.
I can't begin to think about what it means to thwart another human being's grief, to intentionally deny them access to the basic closure that all human beings have. Okay, you want more land from the river to, okay, but if we've now reduced the inability to engage each other to this level, shouldn't we talk about that?
Yeah.
And that's not something Netanyahu is going to permit. He won't even permit a public accountability of how we got to where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
so you give
middle.
sermons based on scripture for your flock to learn why they're reading what they're reading today. Who is going to help the Palestinians learn what is being said on their behalf to represent them to the world? You can't say that to those screaming in Detroit at an airport.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, it's you and I started talking almost a year ago in October. And I remember you seemed to take it for granted that the war would be over in a couple of months.
I did. I
Um,
I think back at almost a childish naivete, an adolescent passion. There will be some source of gravitas politically in Israel who, at an appropriate point, will push him out. There will be a government put together to provide the people with the means to do what is immediately necessary and then grieve. And I don't know when this will be over. I have no idea whether on October 7th, 2024, all the bodies will be buried or Hamas will hold on to them to continue the disruption of chaos. I link it to my first question. How many different experiences of disruption, of extreme push the population toward more fear and vulnerability? As both of us were ordained, called, the extremes are not what I understood the call to require.
mm-hmm.
So, on the span of any given day, we could change the nature of whatever the articles I think we should discuss, not wanting to polarize the conversation. The issue here is neither Trump nor Harris, but shouldn't this be a topic about which all of us, without labels, can seriously engage? Can't we go back to that horrible moment in 2017 that you experienced, Charlottesville?
There does. There's. I don't even know how to express it. There's something about the carnival aspect to Donald Trump um, that I think allows us, non-Jews at least, to not take too seriously the extent to which racist tropes and anti-Semitism have just entered the mainstream. You know, like having dinner with Nick Fuentes. Like, I mean, that's yeah, you know, well, that's an event that came and went and barely got a notice. Um, and so it's just, but once that stuff is out there, it's dangerous.
I continue to go back and wonder in my conversations with the Holy One. There were so many moments in which I was absolutely certain the earth would open up, as the scripture tells us it did with Korah. And I was sure when the president of the United States said, well, there are good people on both sides, that surely is enough to have provoked the earth to open up. No. Not once do I remember anybody saying that during the heat of the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
It may have been that which you thought, but you never said it.
Yeah,
You had
that's what I was
enough,
trying to.
yeah, you had enough decency. Pastor, what happened to the decency we thought we all shared?
It's funny. I think I've talked with you about this. The sexuality debate in the United Methodist Church. It's made me aware of how conflict avoidant and bad at conflict and debate most people are. That they're used to having it online and not with an actual person in front of them. And so I think there's something about having so much of our discourse not be incarnate that allows for greater levels of indecency.
Yes, I accept that, prima facie. But we need then to help each other learn that digital engagement, digital presence still requires a shared sense of decency.
Mm-hmm.
I worry any one of those little articles, I worry about the nature not just of the fear among Jews, but who is it they're afraid of? When you stir the fear, you must then look to the source of what Jews will then become afraid of, not Hamas in the Middle East. Do we need to talk more about how Jews must continue to engage, not just in, quote, interfaith activities, but to trust the people among whom they live?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what do we say to each other on behalf of our two communities that will make them go back and say, we can't let others disrupt a norm we must trust?
I wonder. You mentioned your conversations with the Holy One. I wonder, are there passages of Scripture you find yourself dwelling on in light of this past year?
Wonderful question. Ones that I go back and revisit always. The difficult and complex chapter, Numbers 20. Miriam dies suddenly. We discussed this when I taught my book for you. And we're given no source of her illness, her death, where she's buried. I read that and I'm always shocked and horrified. And then the people immediately come back at Moses and he loses it. And God explains why he'll be punished. Lo lahakdi sheni. You did not sanctify me. You did not sustain my uniqueness. And I think about that task, even though I'm no longer in the pulpit, my title still requires that I stop people. And this has already ended some relationships here. No, you can't lay claim that person is an anti-Semite. What are you saying? God warns us. You're not going to go into the promised land, not merely because you struck the rock twice. Lo lahakdi sheni. You did not sanctify me. So, what is my role as I continue to write and talk? What am I supposed to do? Your role is continuing to mechanize, and by mechanize, make mobile the ideas of dialogue. That's what continues in the moments I'm most confused. So Numbers 20, Ecclesiastes 3, time for every season.
I thought that was an Eagles song. I was just checking.
Yeah.
No, not Eagles, birds.
Birds. It's a lesson of context for me. That these past 10 months have constantly been a lesson. You can't see the whole context. You can only see this. I know I'm supposed to be here. I continue to know that it won't always be in my purview, my experience, to understand why I'm supposed to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Someone will hear or engage what we leave them, someone we don't know, and might take from our conversation about exacerbating the vulnerability of another person and not hold back. The rabbis teach us that the evil in Sodom and Gomorrah was not sodomy, wasn't sexual evil.
Mm-hmm.
It was the intentional cruelty of punishing those who did something kind. A little girl who would take bread and water to a blind poor man who sat at the gates of the city. And the rulers did not want help given. And the punishment was to cover her in such a way that she would be devoured by bees. I keep coming back over the last 10 months and now most recently with judging only what I know is intentional. When I watched the Prime Minister of the State of Israel sit across from the former President of the United States and engage in such a way that the president, former president, can say how any Jew can vote for a Democrat, they're not only out of their minds, but they're not very good Jews.
Yeah, yeah.
Democracy is ultimately an act of civility. I worry about what is being done to our shared capacity for civility, Jason. And yes, Gaza, Israel, the Ukraine, Sudan, there's too much war going on.
Yeah.
But is it because we simply lack the capacity to sustain civility?
Yeah.
The Olympic scandal over a bronze medal. But it's a wonderful laboratory of everything we're discussing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's
right.
about a group of gatekeepers who put in the wrong algorithm. They didn't include a factor of difficulty. Okay, fine. And they were told, and they corrected it. But that's not enough. Late. Come on. 2 bronzes. What are we talking about? The picture that came out of the incorrect award ceremony should have been the best product of the Olympics. 3 young women of color, 2 Americans, offering gratitude to a young Brazilian woman who grew up in poverty. Yes, that's it. Oh, the Romanian too? Great. Our inability to figure something like that out. Wow. You made a mistake. Okay, let me correct it. No, I can't. Little wonder if we can't do something at that threshold of civility that we're having problems with Muslim terrorists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where are you 10 months after this conversation began with a stranger?
Uh, I guess I'm grateful. I'm grateful for uh, what has become our friendship.
Were you
Maybe that's not.
aware as you began to see these little news items? Did it stimulate you to wonder, huh, is this going to be something Edelheit is now worried about?
Uh, I don't. I mean, filter. I do filter news and scripture reading through with. I mean, I do think about these things, trying to um, understand and empathize with how you might be receiving it.
Thank you.
So yeah, so that's that by no means justifies all of the death and tragedy since then, but
No justification. The question was intended to figure out, is the value of investing in Jewish-Christian dialogue and relationship still and always a threshold of value?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did your son pass yesterday?
He did. He did. Which is good because he will be driving to college starting next week. So,
Wow. Are you empty nesters now?
no, he'll be living at home, but I was like, I'm not driving you to campus every day. So, yeah, he did.
Good.
So, yeah, so it's good to see you, and I'll talk to you next week.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Let's see if you're uploaded here.